Hi Yoel, you recently posted a video talking about aiming versus touchdown point and the importance of understanding the difference between the two. I am midway through my training, and after watching your video, I realized no one ever really emphasized this the way you did. While I think I understand it now, that video seemed to have been a short clip out of a full flight lesson with your student. Was curious if you'd be able to discuss more about this on your Ask Yoel videos. Thank you, Nathaniel. For those of you watching who are like, Ask Yoel videos, what is he talking about? So these videos here where I answer people's questions, I call this series Ask Yoel. So people basically email me, and you could do the same. They email me to the email in the description of this video, and they pretty much say what Nathaniel said. So Nathaniel is curious about aiming versus touchdown point. You might be curious about something else. It could be a question, it could be a topic, it could be confusion, it could be a misunderstanding, it could be anything you want to hear my personal take or opinion on. You could email me. So that's what Ask Yoel series is, and that's what Nathaniel is referring to. So yes, Nathaniel, your email did get through, and here we are. We'll talk about it, and I'll explain it to the best of my ability, and I hope that by the end of this video, you have a clear understanding of aiming versus touchdown point as we talk about it in the airplane. So for those of you watching who are like, aiming versus touchdown point, what are you talking about? I would assume you're probably very early on in your private pilot training, because if you landed an airplane at least for a week or two, your instructor should have mentioned the fact that a plane or even without mentioning, if you've done it for a hot minute, you realize that when you come into land with an airplane, the plane doesn't just land on the runway where the plane was kind of moving towards. Rather, there's what's called a round out or a flare or whatever term you want to use. There's sort of this thing where you come in over the runway and then you pitch back a little bit and you hold the plane off the ground, bleed that energy off, and then touch down. So that's what Nathaniel is referring to, and that's what we mean by aiming versus touchdown point. So the aiming versus touchdown point, just to make sure we're all on the same page, refers to the fact that a plane being a plane and not a helicopter. I'll say it again. A plane being a plane and not a helicopter moves towards a certain point on the ground throughout the approach phase. So throughout the final approach phase of the flight, the plane is literally moving, and by plane I also mean you, the pilot, your body. You are sitting inside the airplane. So your body is moving towards a certain point on the ground on the runway. We call that our aiming point. So throughout final approach, you literally keep moving your body towards that specified or specific point on the ground. Now, is that point the point where your airplane's main wheels are going to touch down? The answer is no. Why? Because as you come over the ground, close to the ground, we start rounding out, holding off the airplane, bleeding off the energy. And as we do that, the plane is continuing to move over the ground. And eventually, when the airplane is out of energy, hopefully, here's what a good landing is. A good landing is where you deplete the airplane's energy a hair over the pavement. It's all about placement. If we deplete an airplane's energy at 1,000 feet or any other time, we call that a stall. If we do it when we're close to the ground, we call that a landing. I hope this is a light bulb moment for many of you guys, but that's literally what a landing is. A landing is a stall, or at least a good, perfect landing. Again, keeping out gusty winds or situations where, a soft field where you might need to come in with more energy, but a full stall landing is pretty much, that's all it refers to. It's a stall. We're stalling the airplane, but we're doing it so close to the ground to where the plane doesn't fall. It literally just settles onto the pavement. So that's what a landing is. So again, back to the aiming point. So when we come in throughout the final approach phase or course, throughout the final approach phase of the flight, we're moving towards a certain point on the runway. But as we get close to the runway, we start rounding out. And when we round out, we keep moving down the runway. and eventually we'll touch down when the energy is depleted. So here's what these terms mean. The aiming point is the point towards which we move the plane and our bodies towards throughout final. The touchdown point is just as it sounds. It's that point further down where the main wheels actually touch down. Okay, question. I want you to take a wild guess watching this. Or not a guess, it could be an educated answer. But I want you to kind of roll with me on this one and let's figure this whole thing out. So aiming point, touchdown point. I just explained what each one is. Easy. You might be sitting there going, okay, well, that's cool, Yoel, but what's that distance between my aiming point and the touchdown point? Meaning, how much real estate, how much pavement should I account for, should I devote to this whole airplane running out of energy thing or bleeding off its energy? Meaning, how much further down the line will my touchdown point be from my aiming point? Excellent question. So here's the answer. The more energy you are carrying throughout your final approach phase, or the more energy you're carrying towards your aiming point, the more energy you're showing up with at your aiming point. And what do I mean by energy? Energy is, in the simplest terms for the sake of this video, is indicated airspeed, okay? Energy is indicated airspeed. I'll make a whole other video sometime if you're interested about how in the world is indicated airspeed energy, because maybe you thought indicated airspeed is airspeed. It's not. By the way, it's the greatest, I'll whisper, indicated airspeed is the greatest lie we've been lied to in aviation. There's nothing about indicated airspeed that actually has to do with speed. Okay, that's it for my indicated airspeed whispering rant. Not even rant. It's not a rant. It's just a reality. But if you're interested, email me and I'll make a whole video about indicated airspeed and how it's actually energy. But we call it an airspeed indicator. But for the sake of this conversation, the more energy, the more airspeed, indicated airspeed we show up with to our aiming point, the more energy we therefore have to what's called dissipate or deplete before our main wheels touch the ground. Because what we don't want to do is just slam a plane into the ground while it's flying, while it is energized, while it has a bunch of molecules flowing all around its flight control surfaces. So what we want to do is we want to show up to our aiming point, round out, deplete that energy, touch down smoothly. So back to the question, what's that distance that should exist or that will exist between my aiming point and my touchdown point? Here's the answer. The more energy I show up with to my aiming point, or the more energy I show up to my aiming point with, the more distance I will therefore have to fly through and eat through in order to deplete that energy to reach a state of stall, if we're thinking of a full stall landing, where my touchdown point will be. Does that make sense? The more energy I show up with to my aiming point, the greater distance therefore will exist between my aiming point and my touchdown point. The opposite is also true. The less energy I show up with to my aiming point, therefore the less energy I have to get rid of, the sooner I will touch down. The smaller the distance between my aiming and touchdown points will be. Does that make sense? Okay, rewatch this video 10 times if you need to. It's not complicated. It's just a reality of airplanes. Okay, it's a reality of how airplanes work. They were designed to land this way. We are not a helicopter. Actually, I think there's a video on the channel where I tell my student, we're talking about short field landings or something like that. I was telling my student, we're not a helicopter. Okay, full disclosure, I'm not a helicopter pilot, but watching helicopters land, it seems to me, unless they're doing an auto rotation where their aiming point and touchdown point might be a little different. Maybe even then it's the same. But unless they're doing that, it seems to me like a helicopter could actually aim for and touch down on the same spot. I might be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But a plane is not a helicopter. With a plane, we have an aiming point and a touchdown point. What happens between the aiming and touchdown points? What happens in that space? The answer is, here's the answer. You ready for this? Energy dissipation. Energy dissipation. What was his name? Nathaniel. Nathaniel, what happens between the aiming and touchdown points? Energy dissipation. That's what happens between the aiming and touchdown points. Energy dissipation. As we dissipate energy, we want to hold the airplane off the ground, because if we don't hold the airplane off the ground, we might touch down with too much energy. If we hold it off the ground for too long and too much, we might stall before we touch down, and then we'll slam into the pavement because the plane ran out of energy at 10 or 20 feet. Make sense? So the trick is, again, like I said, it's about placement. A good landing is placing the airplane at a very, very, very close proximity to the pavement, right at the point where the energy on the plane is completely depleted. That's just another way of describing a great landing. If I do it too soon, I just slammed in while still flying. There's still energy. If I do it too late, meaning if I ran out of energy before I'm close enough to the pavement, now I stalled over the runway, and we've all been there, right? And then you just slam. And if you're high enough and you catch it, full power, go around. But sometimes it's too late. So that's kind of the idea. So Nathaniel, I hope this is what you're looking for with the aiming versus touchdown point. Again, the aiming point is the point we aim for. Touchdown point, touchdown point. Before I end this video, I'll add another thing here. Knowing what I just said, knowing this reality about airplanes, that there's an aiming point and a touchdown point, an aiming point and a touchdown point, and this is always true, okay? This will always be true. You'll always have an aiming point and a touchdown point. Now, we could, as pilots, vary, meaning I could increase or decrease the distance that exists between my aiming and my touchdown point. Ooh, how could we do that, y'all? That's pretty cool. I want to sign up for that. Here's how we do it. Just like I said before. What did I say before? If we show up to our aiming point with more energy, the distance between our aiming and touchdown points will be bigger, greater, will increase, because now I have more energy to get rid of. Takes me a little longer to do. I eat through real estate. I eat through distance as I'm flying over the runway, depleting it. Eventually, I touch down further away from my aiming point. But if I show up to my aiming point with less energy, I need to bleed off less. I do it quicker. Therefore, I eat up less runway. My touchdown point ends up being closer. So how do we control the distance between the aiming and the touchdown point? By controlling the amount of energy we show up with to our aiming point. So I'll just draw a picture for you real quick. If you get in your plane next time you fly and you're practicing short fields, and throughout the entire final approach segment of the approach, like the last 300 feet, or 500 feet, but that might be a little too much. You're literally riding the stall horn. So you're just hanging by a thread and you're coming down like you have close to no more energy left on the airplane. Guess what the distance between your aiming and touchdown point will be? Tiny, because you have nothing to deplete. You'll come in. You could probably almost be like a helicopter in that case, almost, right? There might still be a touch of a round out, or unless if you're really hanging by a thread, you might just like boom, settle onto the runway. In which case, your aiming and touchdown points are like right there. But if you're coming in with a nice cushion of 10 knots, right, or 15 knots from a full stall like we typically do, then guess what? Come in, approach is comfortable. I got my buffer. I'm a good distance away from stalling. Everything's beautiful. But the downside, not even a downside, it's just the byproduct of that is now I need to dissipate all that energy. And it eats up distance or runway when I do that. And so that's where your distance between your aiming and touchdown points will be greater or bigger. Okay, The last thing I'll end with when it comes to aiming versus touchdown points as it relates to Nathaniel's question, I just want to read this one more time and make sure I'm covering what he wanted me to cover. Okay, he doesn't say much. Nathaniel, I hope this covers it. Again, as I always do say, I'm sure you'll be watching this video. If this doesn't cover what you specifically were looking for, email me again. But the last thing I'll say about aiming versus touchdown point is as follows, and this ties nicely into those of you who are training short fields. What is a short field landing as far as it relates, specifically as it relates to a check ride? A short field landing, okay, what I'll do right now is I will describe the short field landing in a way that you probably haven't heard it before, and I hope it will be helpful for you. A short field landing is where we specify where our touchdown point will be and vary the aiming point to make it happen. Or we keep the aiming point where it's at, where we typically like it, and vary the amount of energy we show up with to our aiming point so to end up touching down on our specified point. And my point with what I'm saying here is this. Now that you know that there's an aiming point and a touchdown point, we could work backwards. And that's the key, or this is one of the biggest keys to great short field landings. I know how an airplane works. An airplane needs what's called an energy dissipation phase, a given distance between the aiming and the touchdown point. So if on a short field landing, I want to touch down on the numbers, then we already established that's where my touchdown point's going to be. Now let's work backwards. And all you do in short field landing training is literally figure out, okay, this is why the training is important, because you've never probably done pattern work and just kind of thought about this. You just tried to land smoothly. But the training with a short field is what we're doing is we're specifying our touchdown point for it. So now that is constant. That's agreed upon. And all we're doing with short field training, or all you should be really doing, is getting a feel for what different aiming points relative to your specified touchdown point, what those different aiming points result in as far as your plane actually touching down with different amounts of energy. So maybe on one landing, on a short field landing, you come in with an X amount of energy and you aim for X. And then you go, ooh, on that one I floated past my specified touchdown point. So now on the next one you have two options. You can either keep your specified aiming point as it was and do what? Show up with less energy, and then you'll still dissipate using the same distance, you'll show up now to the same aiming point, but you'll dissipate using less distance because you showed up with less energy. Or you could show up with the same amount of energy you did before, but instead of blowing right through your touchdown point, you move that aiming point a little further out, a little closer to you. So you increase that energy dissipation phase. And I'll say this again because this is so important. When you're training short field landings, Nathaniel, I'm assuming this is something you're either doing now or you will do in a little bit. Your touchdown point is specified. And literally on your check ride, you tell the examiner, I'm going to touch down on the numbers, or your examiner tells you, whatever it is. It's agreed upon ahead of time. That's your touchdown point. So what is the training of short field? The training of short field is to go around the pattern and vary your either aiming point or keep your aiming point where you want it and vary your energy. And by doing these two things, you get a really good, solid, intimate familiarity with what does carrying a certain amount of energy translate into when it comes to rounding out and dissipating that energy. What does it result in terms of distance? That's literally what you should be spending your time with short field. And that way, instead of just becoming an expert at landing on the numbers at your airport, now you're becoming an expert as becoming intimately familiar with just how much energy my plane's carrying and what does that mean in terms of my energy dissipation phase distance. That's what makes a great short field pilot great, because they know, here's how much I'm going to eat up, dissipating the amount of energy I am currently carrying. Or the opposite is also true. Here's the amount of energy I'm currently carrying. Therefore, I need to place my aiming point this amount of distance prior to the point I want to touch down on. I hope this is helpful. Watch this 100 times if you need to. But this is literally the mechanics, what a good short field landing comes down to. And this is probably the short field landing specifically. Even though we're always using it and thinking about the aiming versus touchdown point, this is probably the point, the place in training where a good solid understanding of aiming versus touchdown point and the energy dissipation phase, and a good understanding and a handle of how these planes work will serve you the best and will really be an asset for you when it comes to not only nailing your short fields on your check ride, but for the rest of your life, just being a pilot who, rather than being a monkey robot who could place the plane down on a point that they trained 100 times, could now pretty much gauge any spot and know what amount of energy means in terms of distance between my aiming and my touchdown point. That's really what a good feel of your airplane comes down to. Okay, Nathaniel, that's all the time we have for this one. Hope this helps. And I'll see you all on the next one. Take care, guys. Fly safe. Bye. Hey guys, it's Yoel. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it answered some of your questions, confusion, whatever it might be, that I was able to help you in your own flight training journey. If you did enjoy the video and you did find it helpful, I would appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel and like the video. What that does with the YouTube algorithm is it kind of lets the AI way of letting YouTube know that there's some interest here and there's some helpful information for others, and that way YouTube will share this with other students or people who are going through flight training just like you. So if you do those things, it always helps, and I do appreciate it. Secondly, if you also have a topic, a question, a topic, a concern, confusion, whatever it might be that you want me to talk about on these videos here, go ahead and email me. There's an email in the description of this video below. So if you click on the description of the video, you'll see an email. Email that email with your question or topic, whatever it is you want me to talk about. And in the subject line of the email, write Ask Yoel, because this series is what I call Ask Yoel. So that way when the emails come in, we're able to separate them and know that your email is a topic you want me to discuss on these videos. Anyhow, hope it was helpful, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care.